So let's talk a little bit about positioning. Positioning is not other thing than taking an element out of its natural flow and position it somewhere else. That's the only thing that positioning is. Um, there are basically four types of positioning. We have positioning relative, we have which is basically relative to its normal flow. We have position fixed. We have position fixed, which is basically a positioning that an item can be positioned based on the browser window. We have the position absolute, which is basically an element that is positioned based on its parent element. And we have the static positioning, which is basically the default for any of any element. That's the default, our static positioning. So let's play a little bit with this box here, which is contained in a assign element, a side element, and let's start moving around and start position this element. So here the default position, or the one that I have here, is fixed. So fixed, as I said again, or as I said previously, is based on the window. Now, when we set the position, now we have to set values and where this positioning is gonna get into effect. So we have four values. We can do top, we can do button, we can do left or right. So for example, if I set this to a position fixed, I can move this and I can say, okay, I want this to be 0 pixels from the top, sorry. So as you can see, our box here is now positioned on top of the element, basically in top of the main element, and it's positioned on 0 top, which is basically is right next to our our border top. I can say, you know what, I want this box to be 100 pixels from the top, or 300 if I want, or 300. So basically I can move it anywhere I want. And if I resize the window from the top, you will see that the box stays 300 pixels from the top. Now I can combine these values and I can say, okay, from the top, I want this box to be 300 pixels, but I want from the left, I want this box to be 100 pixels positioned. So basically this box here is 100 pixels from the left, or for the border of the window left, and 300 top. Again, so if I move this, the window or the box itself, it's not gonna move, it's gonna stay there. When do we do this? We do this with those really annoying boxes that sometimes you see popping up on websites. That's how they put those boxes on top of the content, for example. That's classical fixed positioning. Sometimes menus, when we look at menus, we're gonna set menus in a position of fixed so they don't move. So basically, like, I can do top 30, 300, left 0, and that box is gonna stay there forever. So that's fixed positioning. Let's talk about absolute positioning. So absolute positioning differs from fixed because absolute positioning is always relative to the parent element. So I'm just going to delete these values here. So the box is there again in its natural position. So let's take a look at this particular code just for a second. We have our body element here, which in this case is 550 pixels, has a padding, and it has a border. So you can see all of that down there, right? Now we have a main element, which is here. It doesn't have any, basically any special coding or any special formatting, and you have the side element, which basically has a width of 80 pixels, has a padding around of 1 m, and it has a border. So where am I going with this? We're gonna take this box and put it on the right, but that's going to depend on the body element. It's not going to depend on the window itself. So this is how it works. I need to set first, if I want to set the side in a position of absolute, I have to set the positioning of the parent element, which in this case is the body element, to a position of relative. So that's kind of the first rule. The parent element of a absolute element has to be set to relative. So just keep that in mind. So after we do that, we go to the side and we're gonna position this to absolute. As you can see right away, I basically took the side element out of its natural flow, and now I have to set the values for this. In this case, I'm gonna set a value of top of 10 pixels, but then I'm gonna use the right one to, let's say, 30 pixels. So that box is there now, but it's inside the basically the body element, which is this border here. I can, if I want, I can do 100 pixels, but notice 400 pixels, but it's still, even though is outside of the body element itself, it's still within the flow of the body element. So I'm just gonna set this to 10 pixels, and that's basically absolute position. Now we can also, I'm gonna move actually this, before I move to the next one, I'm gonna move this box here a little bit. So I'm gonna do 50, no, I'm gonna do 70, maybe 80, maybe 90. 90 is good. Okay. So I'm gonna keep the side over there, and I'm gonna create a new rule for the H1. So H1 is gonna be position relative. So basically, position relative is not anything more than the element is gonna the zero top or zero bottom, whatever, is gonna start where it is, and then from its natural flow, I want to move it around. So basically, I can say top. I'm gonna do, for example, left. Go left. Do 30 pixels, and now you can see that my element start moving, but it started moving from its natural position. If you notice, when I did the absolute positioning, the element, the box, went out of the flow. With position relative, I can position elements and move them, but maintain the flow. And that's kind of the important part of this. So I can do, for example, top, and I can do, I don't know, 10 pixels. So if I go here and click on the main, and actually I go here to the main, when I create a new rule, I'm going to do main and do margin. Sorry, I'm going to do border. And I'm going to do 1px solid black. You will see that all these elements are being moved around. So now it looks a little bit better how this element has been moved. This is kind of quite different from using margins and using paddings. Why? Because we are taking things out of the natural flow of all these elements, and we are positioning around the page, and this is how positioning works.